Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna and this is For Paws in a Book. I make bookish videos here on my little corner of the internet, so if that's something that you're interested in, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Today I'm going to be talking to you all about the books that I read in the month of July. July was a weird month, not only in like quantity, because I read the fewest books that I've read at all this year, but also in the quality, because I had one of the worst books that I've read all year. So it just kind of felt like a icky month. And I'm going to say with the caveat that I am reading the fewest amount of books for me. So like for me it feels like a slumpy book, but I still read 10 books, which is a lot of books, just not for me. If you are new to my wrap-ups, we're going to start out with the statistics, the stats, the nerdy things, and then we will talk about the books from the book that I liked the least to the book that I liked the most. We'll start off with my DNF and then work our way up. So like I said, it was 10 books read, 4,054 pages, which is like still a lot, but again, low for me. The reason being is that I was prepping Amazing Readathon, and so most of the times when I was doing sprints, I was filming or editing or making graphics and stuff like that. This is a huge endeavor that I am doing right now, and it took up more time than I thought it was going to. So honestly, reading 10 books, pretty impressive for also putting on this readathon. August will be better, I promise. My average rating was only a 3.35, and the reason being is I only had one 5-star. I also had one 4.5-star. I had 3 4-stars, so like I have, you know, generally better than average. 1 3.5, 1 3-star, 1 2.5-star, 1 2-star, and 1 1-star. So like it was just all over the board this month. It was a weird month. I read 8 books targeted at an adult audience, 1 targeted at a new adult, and 1 targeted at a YA audience. I read 2 books via audio solely. I read 2 ebooks. I read 1 physically, and I read 5 on a mixture, so it was audio and physical reading, kind of immersion reading. For my genre breakdown, I read 2 contemporaries, which is weird for me. I read 4 fantasy, 1 horror, 1 romance, 1 sci-fi, and 1 thriller. So even the genres were a little bit wonky this month. All right, let's get into the books. The first one that I'm going to talk about is the DNF, and that was Twisted Love by Anna Huang. This is the first book in like a standalone series set of novels. There's 4 in the series. I actually read the 3rd one first because I was reading it for the Goodreads Choice Awards, which I'll link up above, that I did last year. So I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go back and read the other ones, and I didn't love this one. I didn't like the main male character. I thought he was like an alpha a-hole, and it was not a good time. I read about 100 pages and then DNF'd it. I have been told that I can continue on with the series without reading this one, and that the second one gets much better, and I liked the 3rd one. So I'm just gonna like pretend that this book doesn't exist, and we'll move on. There was also something in here that really pissed me off, and I know that the Venn diagram of like people that read romance like this and then also are Detroit Lions fans, it's probably just me, so probably no one else notices. But they were talking about the Thanksgiving football game, and they were talking about how the Lions were playing the Cowboys, and that will never happen on Thanksgiving because the Lions and the Cowboys both host Thanksgiving games. You could pick literally any other team, but those are the only 2 teams that actually host games. So it just, like from the get-go, it was just a mess. Now let's talk about my 1-star. This will likely end up on my worst books of the year. That was The Chaperone by M. Hendricks. This book felt like a 0 draft, right? There was so much going on in this book, and because of that, the pacing moved so fast, and we never got to like stop and settle down with the characters or get to know the characters. And so like when something would happen, I didn't care because I was like, okay, well, we're just gonna keep moving on. This is marketed as like a near future dystopian. There's a lot of like evangelical propaganda in it, or like, you know, trying to fight that, or at least that's what it's marketed as, but I don't think it does any of that really well. I have a very extended Goodreads review that I will link down below because I was so frustrated with this book. This book did not deliver what it was promised. The characters make no sense. The world building makes no sense. Like the teenage girls have to have a chaperone with them until they are like until they get married, essentially. So it's so inconvenient, but like you can ditch them and you can go to parties, and like the chaperones sometimes help you go to parties, and it's like really dumb, and it doesn't make any sense. And then I was also frustrated because the way that the world is set up makes no sense, because a lot of times when you think about a near future dystopian of like, you know, going back to patriarchal ways and things like that, there's always a religious undertone to it, and this one didn't feel like there was, and so there was never a reason why women couldn't be out and about on their own. Like, we never got the why behind the what. I couldn't get past that. And the ending is also an absolute mess. It felt like the author got bored or was like hitting a deadline and just wrapped everything up and moved on with their life. It was November 30th of NaNoWriMo, and we just had to like finish our book and then just published it rather than going back for another round of edits. So I was frustrated with this book. 1 star. Do not recommend it. Moving on to my 2-star read, and that was The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. This is a book about a boy whose friend is a vampire, maybe? Question mark. We don't really know. And it's told in this memoir style. So this guy is writing about his teenage life, and he is writing a memoir. So it's kind of like a book in a book, which is a really interesting concept. And the more interesting concept is that friend then starts like annotating the memoir. So you get this like in-text annotations where like she's writing in red, she like scratches things out and writes her own notes, and then at the end of each chapter has her own take on the chapter. And like that concept is really interesting. The problem is that book was not scary. It did not feel like horror. It was very like lit fic with a horror like whisper. It was not scary. It was really about this like whiny boy whose life is so bad, and it's so rough to be a teenage white boy. It was so boring, and I hated being in that character's head for almost 300 pages. I liked the annotations, and like that was the part that was like spurring me along, and I really liked the audiobook because you had 2 different narrators, and the annotations would happen when they were supposed to, right? So it would read the sentence in the male narrator voice, and then the female narrator voice would like pop in and be like, oh, actually, I think it happened this way. So the concept, great. Execution, not so great. I have pretty in-depth thoughts in a vlog that is coming out, I think, later this week. So stay tuned for that, but it was not a win for me. Next up, I have my 2.5-star read, and that was In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune. I really wanted to like this one because I really did like Cerulean Sea, but this one really fell short, and I just really didn't like it. This book is a very loose Pinocchio retelling, but with androids and robots, and like I can see the parallels there, but like calling this a retelling is stretching it, to say it lightly. And I think the reason why this book really didn't work where Cerulean Sea really does work for some people is in Cerulean Sea you really connect with all of the characters and all of the kids that are in the orphanage. Like you can connect with them and you can understand their trauma. This book you never did. They're just androids, and they're annoying. Like I've never met a more annoying character in my life. They try to say things that are like funny and like quippy, and like it just comes off as like teenage boy kind of humor, and it didn't work for me. So I don't know, am I like done with TJ Klune? Potentially. I think that if you really like whimsical fantasy, like this might work for you, but I didn't like it. I was so bored, and like I rolled my eyes so many times during this book. So it's not a book for me. My 3-star read was one of my Spiffbo books, and that was Hearts Lost by Meredith Hart. This is a self-published, obviously, fantasy romance type book. It's like fantasy with a romantic subplot. And I'm not going to talk a lot about this book because I am doing a specific SPFBO video where I will be announcing the semi-finalist. So this one is in the running for that. But this one was really entertaining and really quippy, and like the banter between the 2 main characters was really fun, and I think kind of reminiscent of Carissa Broadbent. So if you like that banter and those characters, this could be an option for you, a book that you would really enjoy. The cover kind of makes it look YA. It's not YA. There are some spicy scenes, and it's definitely not slow burn like Carissa Broadbent is. So like not that is not the comparison, but at least the dialogue and the banter, I definitely saw the comparison there. My 3.5-star book was Middle Game by Shauna McGuire. I finally read this. This was on my These Books Will Self-Destruct, and I finally got to it. I read this for a vlog that will be coming out next week, so I'll save my in-depth thoughts for that. But I didn't hate this book. I didn't love it. It's not my favorite book in the world, but I really liked the way that the author kind of brought us along the journey of these characters' lives. I struggle to talk about how to compare this book because like it does feel kind of like Down Among the Sticks and Bones, at least the relationship between the two main characters versus like the two main characters like Jack and Jill. So there is that, but like that's not the right comparison because this is definitely more of a contemporary fantasy. We are talking about being in the real world, and so there's not like it's not its own world like the Wayward Children series is. And I also liked the way that they incorporated Over the Woodward Wall into this story. I didn't love Over the Woodward Wall, but I kind of appreciate it more now that I've read this book and I kind of see its significance. For as big of a book as this was, this is a really, really quick read. I was very much invested in it. It's not perfect, but I had a good time with it. So if you like those types of books, maybe pick this up. Next up, we have our 4-star reads. I finally have more than one of them. I had 3 4-star reads. The first one is Una Out of Order by Margarita Montemor. This was comped as like Midnight Library, but quippier and funnier. And I definitely see the comparison. Like if you like Midnight Library, I think you'll like this one. The character is definitely unlikable, and I don't think that there's as much like commentary as the Midnight Library has. It's not quite like as in your face or like a smack you over the head with the message of the book, but it is a similar concept, right? So this woman lives her life out of order. On New Year's Eve every year, she wakes up in like a new year of her life. So she goes from 18 to 50, back to 30, and she kind of has to like piece her life together and figure out what's going on. There are 2 people in her life that know what is going on. Other than that, she has to keep it a secret because they'll lock her up in a loony bin. And I had a really good time with this. I do wish that it went a little bit farther. Like I could have read another like 100 pages of this, a couple more years essentially, but I liked the direction that it went, and I liked the things it was trying to teach the reader in a like subtle way. I can understand why people don't like this one and didn't enjoy it, but for me, I had a good time with it. Another Spiffo book that I read this month was The Sword of Mercy and Wrath. This is the start of a grimdark series. So again, I'm not going to talk in depth about this one. I want to save that for the video that is coming out later this month. But I think this was a really interesting way to do a grimdark fantasy. Now I am not well versed in grimdark. That's not my subgenre of choice necessarily, but I think after reading this I might read more. We shall see. I really liked the way that religion played into this book. It was really interesting to kind of see how like it can corrupt people, and this was a slow descent into madness is what this character was going through. There are werewolves in this book, which like you don't see a lot of in fantasy, and I kind of appreciated that. And I think that this would be a book that you would enjoy if you liked A Touch of Light by Tiago Abdallah. I think that there are similar themes in this book that like you could see one, you know, if you liked one, you might like the other. My last 4-star read was Radiant Sin by Katie Robert. I did an entire chapter 3 podcast with Bethany and Shay and Izzy, so I'll link it down in the description below. But we had a lot to talk about with this book. And this book really explores the macro plot of the Neon Gods, the Dark Olympus universe, and I'm so excited to continue on with Cruel Seduction because the way that this ended was just like, it's blowing everything up, essentially. I know that the complaint for Neon Gods and even Electric Idol is that there's not a ton of plot in the book. It's mostly the romance, and I think that that's a criticism that Katie Robert gets in a lot of her series, but I don't think that that criticism is valid once you get past Wicked Beauty and then especially Radiant Sin. This book was definitely like more plot, less romance. And so I, you know, as someone who likes the politics and the backstabbing and all that stuff, this was a good time. This is the story of Apollo and Cassandra, and there is some fake dating, which is like obviously god tier trope, and essentially she is fake dating him like at this house party with the other members of the 13 and other important people in Olympus. They're expected to be in this like fake relationship so that they can like spy on other members of the 13 during this like gathering, and I really enjoyed this book. The reason why it's not quite a 5-star for me is that the ending was so rushed. There was so much that happened in the last like 50 pages or so that my head was spinning. So I know that that's kind of probably on purpose, because then you want to like binge the next book right away. But you know, unfortunately that one wasn't out yet, so I had to wait. Very excited to continue on with Cruel Seduction. My 4.5 star read was the group book, or the book club book for Not Your Mom's Boozy Book Club, which is the book club that I run with Cal over at Retrieving Books. And we read The Only One Left by Riley Sager, and I am so glad I loved this book. I'm so glad I loved it. This was a book that I was very hesitant about. First off, the cover is god awful. Hated so much. But this is a really like gothic thriller, and it is about a woman who is a caregiver, and she is tasked with giving like hospice care to this woman who apparently had a stroke, but she has been accused of murdering her entire family, like way back in like 1929, and it's now the 80s, and so she's this old woman. She got away with apparent murder, and she has to go and care for her, and there's like things uncover as we go along. There was so many twists and turns. There's a lot of like employees that also work for this woman that like are all sus. It's kind of like a game of Clue as you're reading it, because you're like, you know, is it Colonel Mustard in the drawing room with the candlestick kind of thing? Who actually murdered who? It was really interesting. It was really fun. I read this book in like 24 hours. So needless to say, Riley Sager's back on my good graces list, although I am going to be trying to read Survive the Night, so that way I officially have read all of his books. So we'll see how that goes. And then my only 5-star read was actually my first book of the month. So I started on a great note and then went downhill from there. But that was Lore Olympus Volume 4. That was, this is the newest volume of the Lore Olympus graphic novels. Obviously, this is an absolutely gorgeous Hades and Persephone retelling. The graphics, this graphic novel is so good. This is actually probably my favorite one of the group. I think I've given everything else 4.5 stars. Like, I loved them all. But this one, it just like spoke to me in such a great way. And there's a lot more like character development between Hades and Persephone, but also amongst the other characters. You're definitely building the ensemble at this point. I am sad that this is my only 5-star read though. Like, it's not going to be a favorite book of the year kind of thing. So because of that, it feels like July kind of ended on a dud. I do think, however, that I am being a lot more picky about my 5-star reads recently, and I don't know why I'm doing it. It's definitely a subconscious thing, but we'll see how August goes. Those are all the books that I read in the month of July. Let me know what your favorite book of the month was, and if you're not feeling chatty, let's do a house emoji for The Only One Left. There we go. Let's do that. That is all I have for you today. If you're new here and you have not yet subscribed, there is a little button that you can do so down below. And if you'd like to hang out with me more, the links to my Instagram, Goodreads, Twitter, and my Patreon are linked in the description below. We're having a lot of fun over on our Patreon in August with Amazing Readathon, and then in September we will be doing another round of Scatagorathon. So now is a great time to sign up. Subtle plug there. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.